3, 2, 1. Welcome to Informed by Alan Roebke. We're recording this program on August 17th, late in the afternoon, and we just want to let you know, those of you who are lucky enough to watch our program last week, we did that on Wednesdays. And I said on that program, the most interesting person in this fall's election, in my view, was Keith Ellison running for Attorney General. And wow, was I correct on that. But I did not see coming what the interest I was talking about. But he sure got himself in the news, yet he got himself elected. And we'll talk about Keith a little more. But I think the main portion of this election cycle that the pundits aren't focusing on, that I want to, at least some, this particular program of Informed by Alan Roebke, is the fact that Tim Pawlenty, that the pundits all thought he was a shoo-in to get the nomination through the primary for the governor's race in Minnesota. And I was asked a number of times up here what I thought, and I said it was way too close to call as far as I was concerned. And I told people I certainly didn't see him as a shoo-in. And what's really interesting in this whole process relates back to the Republican Party and the Republican candidates in the gubernatorial race in Minnesota. And we only have to go back to the Emmer race against Dayton. And when this woman came out and talked about DWIs, even though Dayton had struggled with substance abuse a big part of his life, but Emmer had a couple DWIs, and this woman was on, unfortunately lost her son in the middle of the night, and a young, 16-year-old son or something like that. And I told people, Emmer's done. He's got to address that. In this election cycle, on my Informed TV, trying to get back on Twin City TV or any tower I can, including Mankato or Redwood Falls, I contacted the Pawlenty campaign, and I've talked to a number of people, but I don't know if I talked to the campaign with emails or actually talk to them. But anyway, I made it very plain to them. That was early on, before we even really got going in there. As soon as that one woman came on the air and was bashing him for not having a better health program for her son, who was born with only 3/4 of a heart. And then we went into, when the ads started popping up on TV, all of a sudden everybody was bashing Governor Pawlenty. But I had contacted them when the only negative ad about Tim Pawlenty was that woman. And I told them, I said, you need some long format TV. In fact, I got the email right here. I think it was about the 13th of July that I contacted their campaign. I said, for $3,000, I'll get you on Twin City TV. You've got to sit down and talk long format and get these negatives addressed. And their response was basically, well, we know what we're doing, and never heard from them anymore, and maybe an email or two back a little bit, but they knew what they were doing. And it turned out, when all things, the dust is settled here, Tim Pawlenty made the wrong decision when he ran for president a few years back in the Iowa primary, and spent all his money to win the Iowa primary, pushed all his chips in, and what happened? He lost. And his campaign, instead of the pundits talking about him being a positive, he was done because he had no money, and he dropped out of the race shortly after that. Now, in the case of him running for governor again in the Republican primary, I'm sure he's going to probably end up with $1 million in his war chest, or for sure hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I tried to talk to him that you got a month to be on Twin City Broadcast TV, and I'll let you talk, and the programming will loop at least 6 times per 24 hours. Let the people know who you are. And no, we'll do 30-second ads on the big name networks and we'll win. What happened? He lost the election, and he ends up this time with a whole bunch of money left over, but once again, no place to go because he lost the election. It's interesting how people that are very intelligent will do the same mistake or make the mistake of saying, well, next time we're going to do it different. Next time you may need to do it the same, the way you had planned before. In this case, I think when we look at Walz, the winner on the Democratic side, what did he do? He just pushed all his chips in and he hammered the networks, TV all over the state, I presume, and he won as the Democratic candidate. And the other thing I want you to think about in this process of a primary in Minnesota is the fact that Johnson did not beat Pawlenty. Pawlenty was beaten by the Democrats on these constant negativism. They painted him as the meanest, most unprogressive governor in the history of the state of Minnesota, and they did a fantastic job of it. And the funny part, either the day after the election or the 2 days after the election, this Winner's Minute, this preacher on Channel 4 each morning talked about if you're going to succeed in life, you have to respond to your critics. And Pawlenty did not do this. He also made a major mistake, is the fact that his major ad that I remember him talking about, I'm going to cut welfare to people, and I'm going to give the money back to you in less health care cost. Once again, for an experienced politician that should have been able to hire some pretty sharp people to help him with his campaign, of talking this way to what many Republican-based people love to hear, that worthless guy, he can work like me. But the reality is, most people are concerned today about their fellow man. A lot of brand name Republicans think they can work, but the reality in this primary, what does the voter turnout show? The Democrats got a huge turnout compared to the Republicans, and the people that supported Pawlenty, they weren't going to go out and work for him. They were too busy at their job. And when he talked about health care costs, I'm going to lower your health care costs. People, most of the people, working people, whether Republican or Democrat or own their own business today, most people have a health plan from their employer. And they bitch about the price of health care, but the reality, it falls on somebody else. So when you're going to run for governor and stick your fellow man of saying all these people don't need assistance, when we have a lot of people working $11 an hour today, if they are working, we got low unemployment, only 3%, I think. Dayton just announced in an email today, and we look at that. How could this guy, a respected governor, a respected politician around the country, ran for president of the United States, not focus on better content when he did spend some money? But from the Democratic side, I just have to take my hat off to them. You did a fantastic job. So any of you out there that belong to a county Democratic Party or know the people, Martin, when I was on TV, I interviewed him a number of times, always gave me a great interview. And tell them, boy, you guys did a good job of defeating plenty. So Johnson himself didn't have to. And one of the other things on this gubernatorial race I want you to think about is the fact that I would like to see a poll run real soon. Or if you see a poll being run, I got some statistics on an early poll. Send it to Al at informedtv.com. And I'd like to see that. We need to see, we have the right to see, in fact, whether it's KSTP or public radio or public TV that are the AP that run polls. First and foremost, I think there's the first gubernatorial debate this weekend. We as voters, we as citizens have a right to see at the start of this campaign season now who is ahead and how big a margin. And I think that's very helpful for the electorate as well as the candidates. The other thing in this process of the time of the primary, one of the things that we're going to have in this coming legislature, whether the Democrats win or Republicans, or we have a divided House, as they say, is when should the primary be? People, I want you to stand firm on this with me. The primary needs to be moved back to it was when Jesse Ventura won. And the only reason we got all this coverage in this August primary is why? Because we had all these brand name candidates and the networks, these celebrity English majors you call journalists, just eat that up. I mean, that's what they're taught and that's what their advertisers want them to do. When you have brand name people out there, yeah, then you do it. But the reality is, if we want to have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and a true primary that the two parties selected candidates can get challenged by people of extreme substance, then we have to move our primary back to after the state fair. So people like when old Jesse was there, he could get out and shake hands with the people, and or somebody else going forward now. We've got to have our primary after the state fair so we can touch the flesh of these candidates. Republican, Democrat, Independent, or just out of the blue challenger, and hopefully we get some people of substance in there. But the two political parties rule the domain. They're talking about moving it to May or April, and all that does is empower two super big bureaucracies that we the people are not very happy about, and rightfully so. So when you see the Democrats, tell them they did a great job of negativing Tim Pawlenty to death. He did not respond to it, and they got him on edge. He never got his smile back, and it's really sad. And yes, I would like to do a program with him, and I got a request to do that and talk to him about the process, because I was, in 2008, I ran the Republican congressional primary and got over 48% of the vote, and I want to talk to him and share some of the things I ran into. You people in the 7th Congressional District, do you realize when I signed up to run, I was approved by the Secretary of State, even though I have that despicable label on me, a felon. I had full rights to run for Congress. When I got to the 7th Congressional District convention in, I believe it was April 2008. In fact, Tim Pawlenty was the banquet speaker. Yeah, I believe he was the governor then. And gave a great speech that night. I talked to a ton of people afterwards. Boy, you're a really interesting guy. I would like to hear, really look forward to hearing what you're going to tell us in the morning. You know what happened in the morning? I had to go through this committee, and they said, well, you don't have the qualifications. You're not up to the qualifications of 7th District Republicans. I said, what you talking about? You guys don't have a right. The state of Minnesota sets the rules as far as what are the qualifications for candidates. And he said, well, we'll see about that, Mr. Roebke. And I told him I'd been on 6 continents, all the things I did. Then they had the convention in the morning and all these speakers, and I was talking to some people in the background. Boy, everybody's talking. They can't wait to hear what you got to say when you get up to speak. And we were supposed to, the 2 candidates, Glenn Memsey and I, were supposed to talk. I think it was 2 o'clock or something like that. And all of a sudden, right before noon, out of the blue, the chairman of the convention, and I think there was 140 delegates there, the former Speaker of the House, I'm blank on his name, but he was one of the delegates there. They had all these county signs up and that type of thing, and he said, you know, it's lunchtime, but they're not quite done with lunch, are ready with lunch, so I think we'll have our 2 candidates speak. And wow, all of a sudden, we're going to have Mr. Memsey come forward, and said something like that, and all of a sudden Glenn walked. I don't even have my notes with me, Al. And I said, well, do the best you can. And I laughed, and he got up to the podium, and they only let him talk for 5 minutes. Here, these district conventions, you know, they can be dry as dirt unless you've got some good speakers there. Most of it's boilerplate stuff. So he gets up and him, Hawes, and whatever, he tells him, I didn't have my notes here. I didn't think we were going to do this, but he got his message out. And so he steps down, and I walk up towards ready to be announced to come forward, and Mr. Chairman, well, it's about, I said, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I want to speak now here, and who are you? I said, I'm Alan Roebke, candidate for the Republican primary, and you're out of order, Mr. Roebke. And I said, out of order? You said we were going to have the candidate speak. You can't speak here. And I said, what do you mean I can't speak here? And I didn't do anything to disrupt the crowd, and also just dead silence in there. I think there was 140 delegates plus way more than that of people listening. And all of a sudden, I go, can I just have 5 minutes, Mr. Chairman? And I looked around, and is it Seifert, or who was the guy from southwestern Minnesota that was Speaker of the House? I looked right at him, and a ton of those delegates knew me from being a big-time contributor to the Republican primary, and even though they ran me out because I believe in free choice, as little government involvement as your life, and that's possible. I'm not pro-abortion in any manner, shape, or form, but I'm free choice. And no one had the guts. And there was at least a dozen delegates that knew me extremely well all my life, were just sweating when I looked at them. None of them would call a point of order. And all of a sudden, I'm looking, what kind of democracy do I live in? I can't even speak for 5 minutes at a political convention that's running for 2 days. And what happened next? All of a sudden, the chairman goes, will the sergeant of arms come forward and remove Mr. Roebke from the building? That's what he said, people. And I just started to laugh. And all of a sudden, this guy comes from the way back. You know, he had thought he just had this title, you know, and I'd been talking to him in the back of the ballroom there in the hotel there in Moorhead, and all of a sudden, and this guy is 10,000 shades of red. He does not know what to do, you know. Is this guy going to run or hit me? I'm just smiling, and I'm looking at the delegates and just shaking my head. And he said, just lead me out, sir. I'm not going to cause you any trouble. So we need some insight on primaries and conventions in Minnesota. And that's why I really like to talk to Tim Pawlenty. And we, of course, congratulate Johnson on his win. We also congratulate Tim Walls. I would love to have any of them come forward and do a half-hour program with me, as well as a video, and as well as the two chairmans or executive directors, whatever their title is, and Martin is the Democratic side, the lady there, and talk politics to give you some insight, unique insight from a guy that's really been in the trenches and had a life of real experience. And one of the other things then we have to look at the 5th Congressional District in Minnesota. And watching TV, basically news time, and I was looking, where is this Omar, this Islamic lady, the Somali lady, and beautiful lady, first termer in the House of Representatives, and all of a sudden, Anderson Keller, I can't think of her name right offhand. I think she's grew up in Hanska, right down in the backyard of you folks there in New Ulm, southern Minnesota. And she's on the TV every day running a good ad. I commended her, but it was on there regular. And I'm thinking, where is Omar with her TV ads? And then I started to see some of the debates, just kind of flashes in the news about the people in the debate. And here she's dressed like she just got come in from the desert. I mean, she's got her hijab, isn't it, I think, where she's covered, and she looks Islamic. She's and I never saw a TV ad or heard a radio ad, but I don't listen up here to much radio. But I was watching for those TV ads, none. I thought, God, I thought she was going to put up a heck of a fight, but she never even ran a TV ad. Lo and behold, what happens on election day? She just sticks it hook, line, and sinker, and Anderson Keller, she didn't have a chance. And so we see some real insight when we have primaries and not high voter turnout. And when we have primaries and not a chance for people to go to the state fair, 2 million people, and touch the flesh, or brush the flesh, as they say. And here she wins. And I can't help but say, as a Christian first, and yet at the same time, a felon that has worked whatever job I could get, after 2 years in federal prison, worked night shift with a lot of Islamic people, got along with them fine. Some of them treated me extremely well. Some would challenge me on politics and that type of thing, but I just thought, where was all the money for this lady? They knew they didn't need it. This was a combination of how ethnicity, as it is changing very rapidly, people in our country. I would say what we got to see in the 5th Congressional District is what we're going to have in America in 2050. I was born in 1950, but I think the power of tribal or skin color or religious sticking together, wow, it talks about an incredible force. And now we find out there'll be two Islamic ladies, one a Palestinian, and Omar, who is from Somalia. And so when we look at the future of our country, and those of us that are proud of our Caucasian heritage, proud of our European heritage, our Christian Judeo base, where we say, in God we trust on every dollar, and all of a sudden we have taken the position that as Caucasians, as started some time ago, that we have to cut back on population so we don't run out of oil. I remember my dad telling my two brothers and I, 2 kids apiece is all you guys should do. We're going to run out of oil, and so on and so forth. And what's happened? The Caucasians quit having 2, 3, 4 families, our kids, like they did when I was a kid. And all of a sudden, what did corporate America or global business say? We have to have a 3% population increase in the good old U.S. for our economic model to work. And consequently, we let the floodgates come in. If you can get on an airplane, or you can swim across the river, or escape through the desert, you're an American. And I just laugh when I hear the pundits say, well, Russia's going downhill because they don't have any population growth. Well, traditional America doesn't have any population growth either. It's just all the immigrants that are coming in. And obviously, we've got beneficial immigrants. I grew up Latino people, of course, in sugar beet country. A lot of friends that way. And so it's a challenging issue. And it's an issue that is changing America. It's not expanding America, it's changing America. And when we look back to the 50s and 60s, when I grew up as a kid, I don't think a nun in those days, the heydays of the Catholic Church, I would say in the 50s and 60s, if a nun would have ran and had her religious costume on, just like Omar had her religious costume on, wouldn't have got a vote from anybody other than a few diehard Catholics. And yet now we look at a Congress coming up that we're going to have our first 2 Islamic members, and in our society they're certainly welcome and have that opportunity. But I'm just talking about the change. The other thing, as we run down in time here, is Trump is finally flexing his muscle in a meaningful way with this, is it Brenner? This security clearances. I was shocked. I had no idea that we allowed these guys to have these security clearance long after they left office. I support it for the first 6 months, or maybe even the first year, but to allow these guys to bash the president or have access so they can get premium speaking fees, all because the bureaucracy has said, well, we're part of the system and you've got to let us have inside information so we can fill our pockets now. The other thing I want to touch on quick, Farm Fest didn't have anything that I could see about an alternative to the Trump $12 billion plan. I'm going to have a program on that next week for you farmers or landowners out there or taxpayers, and we'll look at the alternative Alan Roebke has put forward. And there's going to be some key economists look at it this week. And interesting, Farm Fest didn't have anybody in the podium for that. And yet I've notified Big Iron, I want to be on the podium. I want to put an alternative to $12 billion. Eliminate the $12 billion and I'll increase the market income for our farmers, and we'll do some retaliation based on a sound market of the Chinese and Europeans both that are pushing us around. Thank you for listening.